me turn on my camera. And Karen, are you still officially on this, not being on a school committee? Are you here to observe, or what's your role here now?
I'm still a member. I don't remember that you can't be, like, there's 3 from Northfield.
Okay. Oh, that's great. I didn't know if you were because you were representing the school committee, I think, before.
Yeah, well, and then Michelle took over that.
So where are you from? Are you from Berniston?
No, Leiden.
And Michelle's from Leiden.
Michelle is on the school committee.
Perfect. And then we have
Steve.
Oh, Steve. Right. Okay, great. Okay, so let me get started. So we are recording this meeting. Welcome to the Sixth-Town Regional Planning Board meeting being held this Wednesday, March 26th. I'm calling the meeting to order at whatever time, at 6:35. We do have a quorum, so we'll just do a quick roll call vote. Greg?
Here.
I'm here. Karen?
Karen O'Neill here.
Yeah. Raina? Renee? I'm sorry, Renee.
Here.
Bill?
Yes.
And Christy? Oh, nice. Yeah.
Here.
Cliff?
Hey, Alan, wait a minute. Yep. I think I accidentally counted Steve. We may not have a quorum yet. We may only have 8. We need 9.
Well, I know Catherine may be joining us later, and Michelle, I think they're at the same meeting.
Catherine is not. Has she joined the committee too? She's a select board member.
Oh yeah, no, she was on DRAS, but Michelle was going to be.
There we go. There's Deb. Now we've got a quorum.
All right, so Deb, thank you, Deb, and we have David.
Yeah,
so we'll
call on Cliff yet?
No, I was in Cliff when you pointed out that we still needed to go.
Yep,
so Cliff,
I'm here.
And David?
I'm here.
And Tupper is attending. He's not voting, but he's sitting in and watching. And we have Steve.
And which Deb do we have?
And we have Deb,
Okay.
Deb Pote.
Okay. Because I can't see everybody.
She's on there. I can see her.
Well, good.
All right. So we've called the meeting to order. So we are, recording the meeting. We will handle everything accordingly to the way that the legislators have said we could extend our meetings, which will be coming up, but this one applies to the old rules. Just a couple of quick things before we start. I just want to give a shout out to the DRAS members who dedicated many hours crafting a proposed agreement.
Right.
And they listened to each other, their points of view with respect while collectively finalizing a document to recommend to you for your consideration. I also want to put a shout out to Jane Dutcher and Stephen Nesting Power, Tupper Brown, Greg Stedeker, Michelle Giarusso, Catherine Matadio, Ginger Robinson, Dorinda Bell Up, Matt Lord, Chris Hinkle, Jessica Foote, and Deb Pote for attending those meetings and contributing to them. Many of these members were appointed by the select boards to represent their towns and to bring their perspective to our meetings. Also, Jay, I want to extend my thanks to you and your team for helping the subcommittee work through that process to craft a document. I'm also hoping that as part of this, Jay, once you've reviewed the articles, answered questions, and if the committee's comfortable, that we vote to have it move forward for a technical review. And so the technical review, just to bring members up to date, is we were fortunate. We had all 3 school committees vote to have our shared attorneys, who is represented in Warwick and Gil Montague and Pioneer, to do a technical review, which basically means he would take this document. He would look at it very carefully to see if it is meeting the state laws and regulations for DESI that are applicable to regional school districts. He will do that work. One of the members on here, Tupper Brown, had some suggestions and so forth, and I said to Tupper that I would be, sharing those with the attorney as well. The Once the technical review is done, then Jay, you'd be working with Desi and just checking language and see if there's everything in there is copacetic. And then without those two pieces of information, it will come back to this planning board, and then we will, consider what our next step would be. Eventually, we need to vote to move it forward. If we do that, then we're pretty close to our timeline that we originally set out, and we will be looking for additional grant money to have an outreach piece of this for the 7 months, with a recommendation that we have something to offer to the towns to consider. And we're going to try to secure some grant money because that I think will require some on the boots for us to get out and explain this, as well as a number of avenues for people to look at this agreement and have their questions answered. So that's kind of an overview. The other items on the agenda are pretty straightforward. They're informational, and I think we can work through that. So this is the lion's share of the of how this meeting is structured. I have reached out to Joanne to have Joanne Blyer from the Gilmonagan Regional School District to provide an expense report on all the items that we've expended to date and what that balance would be. I also reached out to Sean Cronin from the Department of Revenue, whom we got this grant from, and I sent I left a message for him on his machine, as well as sent him a pretty extensive email kind of outlining the wonderful things we were able to do with the money that he provided, and kind of alerting him to see if there are some other grants that he knows of that we could get move forward, because after June 30th, that grant that we have is ends. And as Matt Lord pointed out, although we've been working on this for 5 years, it's been on and off radar screens in the general public, and it would be really important that we reach out and really make a strong effort to have the general public learn all about the work that we've been doing all this time. Any questions on how we're moving this meeting along? All right, Jay, with that said, I think we'll move it to you. People have had the regional agreement. Thank you for getting that out. And you can go through that. Greg?
Okay.
Did I miss something?
Yeah, just a quick question. When you reached out to Sean, I think you CC'd me on the email, but I haven't read it. Was the idea to seek grant funding through the town meeting votes when we get to that? I mean, in November, or were you asking farther out that if a vote passes, let's say for all 6 towns, for transition funds to fund the superintendent and business
Right.
director?
Okay.
Just so I know.
Yep. Good question. And so what the ask was to see if there was funding that he could provide that would go from July 1 through December while we do the outreach. I also then pointed out that we have reached out, and I think members of the planning board received communication that we sent out to our senator and representative on December 18th, bringing to their attention that we would expect that they would earmark money for if this were to pass, and we'd like them to act on that and reserve it now, because there would need to be funds to support a superintendent, transitional superintendent salary, whether that be part-time, probably a business administrator, money for legal services to negotiate the various contracts that would have to be negotiated and so on. So I won't get into more of the weeds, but I laid out there that we're definitely going to be looking for additional funding. I also want to point out, since we're at this piece, that if this goes when it goes to town meetings, we're hoping it's in November, got a special town meeting in all the towns at the same time. That my thinking right now is we really have to have some kind of language when the legal people, craft something that would go on the warrant, that it's got to be contingent upon funding. And I don't know how that's worded, from the state or from DESI to support the creation of a new super regional school district. So I think it's only prudent to do that. The towns can't afford to be coming up with funds to do that, and there needs to be, I use the word skin in the game from from our legislators and from DESI to support this effort. If it's not, then it's not funded, and so that's my thinking right now.
Alan, I'm just the one thing we might want to do is reach out to Comerford and
Oh, absolutely. Again,
no, not just, but not about earmarking money. It might have to be special legislation. So we might want to talk to him about that. So,
sure,
okay,
sure.
that's it.
So I got an idea. This is David.
Hi, David.
Um, so the Lieutenant Governor's office has community compact funding, and this is along one of the lines that they fund. Warwick has one for a senior engagement project. I'm not sure what the limits of how many you can hold, but boy, it was fast turnaround and a very light lift. And it would involve all 6 select boards signing on. But I kind of think the state would love it. I got $35,000 to address senior social isolation. There's a 2-year grant. They sent a check and they said, in 2 years, we're going to want to report and tell us what you learned.
That's nice to know, David. Thank you. So we've got possible legislation. So we'll reach out to our legislators, earmarking money, maybe DOR or DSL, might know some sources. And then we have this community, you call it the community PAC?
Community
Compact?
compact. And
Compact.
let me just amend that statement a little bit. That same funding we got for the Heart Committee, and it only took Warwick and Northfield coming together, and they were willing to fund all the involved four towns effort. So
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm a little more optimistic when I hear news like that, because sometimes it feels like an uphill battle.
yeah.
All right.
Well, $11 billion of healthcare money hadn't been canceled at the time, but
Yeah, true. Okay, let's move forward then. Jay, you all set to take over?
Yes.
Thanks.
Good evening, everybody. Names and faces look generally familiar. I'm impressed that you've all stayed with this initiative as long as you have. That's great. Greg, I don't know how you want to do this. Do you want to share the document as I speak or not?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay.
Give me a second here.
And I also want to second Alan's comment and compliment the members of the drafts group. So I was looking back today and noticed that our first meeting of the drafts was April 3rd, 2024. So this has been a year-long effort, and people have been great about staying with it, offering input, discussion, debate, and bringing local perceptions to bear on how this was written. So thank you all for them. They've made this a better process. Also want to second very briefly the fact that the status of the document right now is not final status. And this will be reviewed locally by attorneys, and it will be reviewed by the Commonwealth and their attorneys. So our experience with that is that those changes inevitably make the document a little sharper and a little better. It's a healthy and helpful part of the process. I'm going to speak pretty generally to this. I'm not going to dive into every detail in all 13 or 14 pages. And I'm going to speak actually from the regional district agreement checklist that was issued by the state and that we shared with the drafts committee at the very beginning of this process. So if you scroll, this is the cover page. We need a name for the district. That would go at the top of this thing is the table of contents, which they ask for. Um, and we get into the introductory paragraph, which basically states that this is an agreement among the towns to establish a regional school district. And then all of the sections are the mutual promises, and it is agreed hereby. So here we go. Section 1 is you have to you can keep scrolling, Greg. The references I make are required components of a regional agreement. So the first one is you've got to say what type of district it is. And the drafts committee came up with this definition. So it's a pre-K through 12 regional school district. And it states some legal language about being able to provide vocational education if they choose to, and some wording qualifications about referring to the committee throughout the document as just the committee, the school committee. So the powers and duties of the district committee is section 2, another required section. And drafts group spent quite a bit of time. This is one of the sections that took quite a bit of time. And the requirement here is that a regional committee, school committee needs to be in compliance with the constitutional requirement of one man, one vote. And there are 5 ways you can do that in terms of composition of school committees. And the drafts group chose an option that's actually very familiar to the Pioneer Valley District. And it's district-wide elections with residency requirements. So this section spells out in a generally proportional way the number of representatives from each town, and that the committee would consist of 13 members. Okay. So that means elections occur at the biennial election time in November. Everybody votes for every candidate, and then the people with the most votes from the respective towns where there's a requirement are the folks who represent that town. The committee has, this is kind of an important sentence in number 3 here, that the school committee has additional powers and duties as specified by Chapter 71, Section 16. So there are some things in this that are not in this document, that it's sort of optional to include them, but this sentence is an umbrella statement that basically says there's a lot of other things that a regional school committee can do, and I can speak to that at the end a little bit. So consistent with all regional school committees, they meet, they organize, elect a chairperson. You can scroll down, Greg. And let's see, a little bit more about each person has 1 vote. There's language there. Oh, there are term limits in this agreement. So committee members are limited to 2 terms. And then there is language about filling a vacancy. The town officials from the town where there is a vacancy meet with the remaining school committee members from that town, and they vote to appoint somebody for the balance of the term until there's a next election. That's fairly typical process. And then scrolling down further, what else have we got? Even further. Okay, so the next section is about students. fairly brief and straightforward. And kids who are residents in the six towns would attend these schools. The draft committee also wanted to honor and keep in place tuition agreements that the two districts, meaning Pioneer and Gil-Montague, currently have. So there are students, I believe, from Irving that attend the Gil-Montague secondary schools, and those kinds of agreements would be continued as long as there's appropriate payment and school committee approval, which is very likely. And that kids can go to Chapter 74 vocational technical schools in the manner that they currently do. What else did I want to mention about this? This section in no way conflicts with the statewide school choice program. So the statewide school choice would continue to function in a six-town consolidated district, just the way it does in the two respective districts now. Okay, there's no conflict there. Section 4 is another section that the draft committee spent quite a bit of time on. So where the schools are located and the leases of the elementary school buildings. So what you want to keep in mind is that a new district would own the secondary schools, but the towns would own the elementary buildings. And so therefore the new district would lease from the from the towns those buildings and facilities and grounds. Okay. And there's some standard terms to the leases which are laid out here in terms of 20 years. Most agreements don't involve any kind of rental payment because that turns into something that's circular. The draft committee wanted to put in a phrase that indicates that if there is an expense over $20,000, it'd be considered a capital in terms of maintaining these elementary schools. It'd be considered a capital cost and paid by the town that owns the school. Anything under that amount, the six-town district would be assuming as part of their regular maintenance and repair budgets. Scrolling down some more. So the buildings can be leased out or rented out or approved for use by the member towns. There's no problem there. And the committee is going to develop some standards to make sure the leases are consistent from town to town. Another required part of Section 4 is what are the schools? So the section in red is the date of the agreement, which is going to be the date that the commissioner approves it. So that's down the road a bit. But there are the schools. And then in Section C, it defines the secondary schools. I don't think this is a surprise to folks. The draft committee was designating the Pioneer Valley School as the middle school and Turner's Falls as the high school, and that the school committee would assume the role of defining specific grade configurations or allowing an exception from time to time or whatever it might be. So Section D is about closing a school, and again, something we spent quite a bit of time on. The overall concept here is that, if you could scroll down, Greg, is that the district must begin if a school looks like it needs to close, the district first has to do a vote way ahead of time to start a study. And the study is fairly comprehensive, and the components of it are listed in Section 3. At the end of the study is reviewed by an ad hoc committee with membership from the town where the potentially closed school is located. And then further down, if we can keep scrolling here, the committee would also hold a public forum in the member town where the school is proposed to be closed. So quite a bit of time quite a bit of study, quite a bit of analysis, and quite a lot of opportunity for public input. And then finally, the committee can vote to, to either close the school or give the town the ability to keep it open if they follow the provisions in section 8. So if you scroll down a little further, what it means is that the town can keep the school open as long as they pay for salary for staff costs. Okay. So that's the way we fashioned this. There were a lot of voices involved here. And that's the way it came out. This may or may not be improved as it gets reviewed. We'll see what the review brings. Section 5 is a required section, and spells out the process for the budget. And the process is really very similar to the processes that are followed by Gil-Montague and Pioneer at the current time. Okay, so they develop a budget consistent with 7116B. They have to hold a public hearing. They have to have a vote of 2/3 of the committee to forward it to the member towns. And then beyond that, if we can keep scrolling, it has to be itemized in a certain way. There has to be a 45-day time limit between when they send it to the towns and when it's voted. And let's see, the budget must be approved by a simple majority vote at 2/3 of the member towns at a town meeting, consistent with the requirements of the statutory method. So that's the statutory assessment method is something that's described in the next section. The next section is about an annual report. The select boards have input into how that works. And then there's some language here about if the budget is amended, which is not typical, doesn't happen very often. If the amended budget impacts the towns in a financial way, they have to approve it. If it does not, then the committee can approve it. That's the nuts and bolts of it. In my experience, the only really way that this happens is if the state, if they're late with their budget, sometimes the minimum contribution numbers change. And when they do, it very seldom means that you've got to go back to the town. So this language kind of gives the committee a way to manage that efficiently. And then the next section is about apportionment of expenses. Again, another required section. And the drafts committee came up with this a little further down, Greg, the like most regional school budgets, there's 4 components to the budget. There's operating costs, there's capital costs, transportation, and debt. So in terms of the operating budget, there's a formula here. This is the formula that is followed by both districts. You have your aid, you have your required contribution, other revenue sources, and then you take your budget and figure out what is required above the minimum that's coming in. And then that amount is apportioned according to the formula that's defined here. And the only change here is that the drafts committee chose to use 5-year averaging so that it sort of smooths out the bumps in terms of enrollment changes, makes it a little easier for the member towns to plan. And you can keep scrolling, Greg. Capital costs are assessed in the same way by enrollment, by averaging enrollment from each town over the total number of kids in the district. Transportation costs also assessed the same way, and you can keep scrolling. I think the next section, yeah, okay. So this is one of the activities that the law authorizes the school committee to do. And so they can borrow money. They can borrow money for temporary purposes, and they can borrow money for capital purposes. This refers to the capital debt borrowing. And there are two ways to do it. All of this language is statutory. So it's pretty standard. Usually what happens is that districts will, let's take an example. Let's say they have to build a new early childhood center. Well, the money for that is needed. You're going to need to borrow it, and that borrowing needs to be approved by the member towns. That vote goes out to all of the member towns separately, and all the member towns need to approve it. The other option is that you can do a district-wide vote, and then that's section N. And if the majority of voters say yes, then the borrowing is approved. Section N is a much more controversial method for borrowing. Section D is more typically used. The transportation section is required, and what it does, it's very brief, but it's the basis for how the district will receive transportation reimbursement. And then the next three sections are about how things might change. So the provision for amendment, this section is about how an amendment is initiated, and then what happens once it is, and what is required for approval of the amendment. And that by amendment, I mean amendment to this agreement, this document. So in this case, if you could keep scrolling down a little bit, majority of all the members of when a majority of the member towns, so a majority of the member towns need to approve an amendment by a majority vote at an annual special town meeting. So the standard here is a majority of the member towns have to approve that whatever change is suggested to this document, and a majority is 4 out of 6, which is actually the same as 2/3, as long as the number of member towns stay the same. And then the next section is about admission of a new town. And here, a minimum of 2/3 of the member towns, each might have to vote to approve this. So let's say there's a neighboring town that wants to come into the district, need to revise this agreement. Lots of things have to change in terms of how you budget, how you compose the school committee with a new town, etc. And in this instance, 2/3 of the member towns need to approve a new member, which again is, I mean, if there are 6 towns, it's the same as a majority. And then, so there are some qualifications here about how the new town still has to pay its own bills. The district doesn't assume any financial obligations of the town coming in. And the new town has to chip into pension and health insurance costs as you would expect. And if you keep scrolling, not the last section, but the next one is the withdrawal of a member town. And in this case, the draft committee chose for 3/4 of the towns to approve withdrawal. And that's because they felt that withdrawal was a more serious and in some ways impactful, and perhaps in a negative way, to the other member towns. And so it shouldn't necessarily be easy. It should be a higher standard for leaving. And there is language here that it's important about the financial obligations that the withdrawing town carries with them. So they have to pay for other post-employment benefits. They have to pay for pension liabilities. And if there's any capital borrowing, let's say that early childhood center got built, they have to keep paying for it if they were part of the borrowing initially. And then if we can keep scrolling, what is next here? That's all about the obligations, the membership of the district changes, money that they leave the district can only be used for certain purposes. And you can keep scrolling some more here, Greg. Section 12 is just about the fact that at a minimum of 10-year interval, the committee will establish an ad hoc group to study the agreement and report whether or not any changes might be beneficial to the school committee. And the report is shared with the towns, and the committee is not obligated to follow the recommendations, but it is obligated to give them due consideration. And then it describes the composition of that ad hoc committee. Section 13, I know Steve is sitting in. Do you want to talk about the transition period, Steve, or do you want me to keep it going?
I'll talk about it.
Okay.
Thank you, Jay. Very nice job so far. When you decide that you're going to form a new six-town region, that has to be decided before December 31st. Then you will have at least minimum six, maybe you have to wait more than that. And during the transition period, a transition school committee is formed from the members of the current school committees. And then they have the transition. So they have this, you have a transition school committee. The school committees in the two member regions, Pioneer and Gilmontague, would still be operational during this part. The transition committee will need to hire a superintendent. It can be one of the current superintendents or another person. And then that person then is going through all the processes to form the new region. And eventually they would be hiring assistant superintendents, business managers, and so forth to come in on the date that the new region starts, but also some of them might be brought in during that process that need to have, because it's going to be a lot of work to be done, pulling everything from the two regions into a single region. I served as a interim superintendent and familiar with that process. It takes time. You might need a year. So some timings might have to change around as we go along. But again, it's important you realize that at one point you'll have three school committees. And once the date that the new region starts, the two existing school committees then end and those regions end. And also part of this process is all the assets and liabilities have to be how they're going to go to the new region, and that process has to take place. So I think, and then what we timed it because it's going to be the annual at the annual biennial elections from the state that the on the date that it says in there, I can't remember the date at the moment, but the date that certain date that after an annual biennial election, the permanent school committee will be elected as the transition, and then on the date the new region, they'll assume to be the new school committee for the region. So it's a process pretty well defined, but it takes place, and it's a lot of work. But I think in the end, people will be very happy. Think that, Jay? Anything else?
No, I just wanted to circle back. I mentioned this blanket statement at the beginning of the document, and just to give you an idea of what that covered, in addition to what's covered in the agreement, that covers and gives the regional school committee, and this is typical of all regional school committees, that they have the authority to sue and be sued. They have the authority to incur debt. They have the authority to incur debt for temporary purposes. They have the authority to engage legal counsel. They have the authority to adopt an annual budget. They have the authority to rent and lease. So all of those things are included in the in that statement about Chapter 7116. So
Jay, if I
again,
could add one more thing.
sure.
What's up on the screen is the initial staggering of terms, just so you know how staggering it takes place. So people will be on a 4-year term or a 2-year term, and then they get a 4-year term. So you have to stagger them because you don't want everybody going off the same year. So that's what's up on your screen now that you can see.
So that's a real quick run through of something that took a year to accomplish. And again, a shout out to the DRAS members. I think they really did a nice job and know their towns well and have a good handle on things that are important in terms of public schools that serve the kids and families in your communities. So that's where we are.
Jay, just a matter of, I guess, understanding and clarification, and why Steve's here. Part of the process, because this is the document, part of the process we mentioned a technical review and DESI reviewing and approving, of town votes to do. My understanding is that that the transfer of assets and, property, buildings and so forth has to be done through legislation because the districts, don't, my understanding is don't have the ability to do that. And that and I'm thinking that there would also be a legislation that would dissolve the existing districts at that point in time. So if you could, I may be not understanding that correctly, but if you could speak to that, that'd be
No, I
helpful.
think you've got, I agree with everything you said, Alan. That's not something that can be accomplished through a regional agreement. It's beyond the authority of a regional committee or regional committees to do that. So, we've forwarded you folks the legislation that was drafted for the Berkshire regionalization study, and it does just as you described. So it basically um, gives definition to the liabilities and assets that are currently in the hands of the two existing districts. And it dissolves those districts as legal entities going forward. So, yeah, so that's a very important piece to this, and that's one of the things that happens. What's one of the final defining steps. So it would be about the new six-town region would own the regional school buildings, Pioneer and Gil Montague, Turners Falls and Great Falls. And it would speak to the pension liabilities that each district has, and it would speak to the other post-employment benefits, meaning health insurance for retirees primarily, that both districts carry. And that's an important step. So I think you've got it right.
Yeah, and am I assuming that we would have available on town meeting floor? Because another piece to this is we'll have to do that study. Of course, it's done every year as part of the audit, so schools would, districts know what that liability is. We would have to have some help to, make sure that we have that number right, and that would be available or probably in answering a question. But that specific amount wouldn't be in a regional agreement. It would be
No,
informational.
it wouldn't. So you may
Right.
still want to do an actuarial study on the post-employment benefits and pension liabilities. Not a terribly expensive study to do, and it
Mm.
does give definition to what the towns would be responsible, what the new district would be responsible for. So and then the other thing is, it's my understanding that in the Berkshire case, the legislature only acts on that special legislation when everything else is in place. Okay. So it really is like the last step.
Yeah. So can we remove that from the screen so I can see folks? And I would like to open it up for comments, questions, and so forth to everyone that's here. I see we have, just for the record, some other people that have joined us. I saw Renee Dastrois. I see she's here. Raina. Pat Shira has joined us. Michelle. Michelle, you were chair along with Chris. Thank you all for the good work that you've done. Everyone was recognized at the beginning of the meeting. And do we have anyone else that I think that covers everybody? So we have Cliff's hand up. We have Renee's hand up. So why don't we start with Renee? You're on my left on my screen, so I'll go that way.
Okay, thanks. And I don't know if this is the right time and place for this question, but as you were describing what's in the document, it struck me when you mentioned about Irving agreement not changing under this new formation. And in the current time, Warwick is in a very similar situation. They're tuitioning their kids to Pioneer. So aren't we really talking about 3 superintendencies ending? Because is it, Warwick currently has a superintendent or not?
Right, right.
And then this district would be reconfiguring in a way that was assumed at the beginning of this process, because this process has taken so long. So I don't know. My question is this current document really reflecting when it goes to the towns that Warwick would essentially be coming back into this new super district or whatever we're going to call it, where they were formerly not a part. Like, to me, currently they feel a lot like Irving.
Yeah.
And it's
So
being presented in this document as if, like, I don't know what that whole liability looks like when it's laid out to the expenditures that will be assumed both by Warwick and the new district. So again, that nuance struck me, and I don't know if that was addressed, and I have not been following as closely as I was at the beginning. So I apologize if this is a bad, if it's already been addressed.
So this is all very interesting to Warwick because we've been through half of this process in terms of pulling out of a district, which is kind of what you're doing. So our reentry would in fact stop our payments that we make for the post-employment costs and such to Pioneer for our share, and we would be back in the district, and the district, two merged districts, would be assuming what Warwick had parceled off a piece of to pay for a long, long time. So Warwick's not exactly like, I don't really understand the wanting the persistence of the leases, because the leases are not the leases, the tuition agreements, because they're at maximum 3-year duration, and Warwick would be free to tuition agreement with Mahar next year. We're not bound at this point to tuition agreement with Pioneer. So, but Warwick isn't like Irving, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So Renee, if I can
we got
here,
thank you, John.
The agreement is written in terms of composition and budget and so forth, so that it encompasses Warwick. It's a 6-town document. Okay. So that does mean, you're right, that Warwick would also, in the legislation, no longer be an entity. Okay. And their obligations would shift to the 6-town district. Irving is a different matter because Irving is its own school district, and they would still have their own school district. And it's just a matter of honoring the tuition agreement that's in place with them.
So let me just comment, because Renee, that was excellent of you bring up that point, because I actually hadn't thought of, that perspective in David's comment. That's a really interesting one. So the idea behind this is that wherever they are, whether it be Pioneer with Vermont or Irving as part of this, because they are very interested, particularly Irving, in this process, that the present agreement would sort of be grandfathered in, and it would be honored until whatever the expiration date would be, and then a new agreement would be crafted. So it's a little tricky in that we're trying to keep Irving very much in the loop, because their agreement, and Bill could probably speak more specific if I'm not getting this quite right. I believe their agreement is written as such that if they weren't part of the district, that they would have to give Irving a 3 or 4 or some amount of years notice if they were going to decide not to allow their students to tuition in. And so we wanted to sort of preserve any language like that and just, I'll use the word grandfather it until that agreement expired. Bill, did I get that right or no?
I think so. So
you're on mute, Bill. Still on mute.
Yeah.
There we go.
You got it fine. I don't know if it's 3, 4, it might even be 5 years. It's a long time.
Yep. All right. Thank you. All right. So we have Cliff. Hi.
All right. So my kind of question was more on the term limits, because I'm just thinking kind of like, I don't know how it is in the other districts, but we have a hard time even filling all our positions on the Gil Montague committee. So I'm kind of thinking, do we really want to shoot ourselves in the foot and get people to boot after 2 years when we can't even fill chairs as it is?
Yeah, so it's a it's a good question, and it's a point that we talked about with the drafts committee, and all I can tell you is that the draft group felt that this was something they wanted in the document. I think you make a pretty good point about how hard it is to find people. But apparently there've been some problems with long-standing year after year committee members who don't give others a turn, and that was a concern. That was the way they chose to do it. I understand your point, though.
And
Just
that doesn't necessarily have to remain either. I mean, this was great process and so much consensus to that. So, we'll be looking for more feedback and try to move this along. I see David's hands up. David?
Struggling to unmute. I think term limits are, in this case, a good policy. I don't think I'm looking forward from that part. I kind of wish there were time limits. I think 9 years, I wish I'd been term limited. My first question had to do with later on a statement that, among corporate powers that the school committee has the right to incur debt. And it didn't, what I heard in terms of how debt was taken on by the school committee in terms of a positive affirmative vote by the towns, not consistent with my understanding of the law, which is that the school committee votes it and has to notify the town, and the town has 45 days to repudiate it. Otherwise, it's the debt. So is this document trying to adopt a different way, which is in fact the way Pioneer approached it, but not what the law says? And are we trying to embed that in this document so it's different from the law?
No. I don't know. Steve, do you want to comment on that? What's in this
I
document?
don't want to get inside baseball too much. It can be later.
Yeah. No, this document is trying to follow the same process for incurring debt that all regionals have to follow.
Okay. Because in history, Pioneer didn't understand that. And that's not the way Pioneer has adopted debt. And the same with Pioneer never understood until recently that if a budget is voted up and down. There were times when a town would amend something off, and they would do the math and say, okay, this is the assessment, and not bring it back to a vote. So I just want to make that point. The thought occurs to me that if you close a school, there ought to be the automatic option to get out of the district and not have to go through hell. That is if the closure of the school is contrary to the wishes of that town. But I think it would make a difference in Warwick. Although it also occurs to me that nothing would prevent residents of the other towns to say electing me back to a school committee, and there might be another candidate from Warwick that everybody in Warwick voted for. But so when we got to the filling the vacancy, if someone resigned, I think what I heard is the other members from that town would meet and recommend somebody. But what happens in Leiden and Warwick when there isn't another member?
Then the town officials do it by themselves.
Okay. And then finally, we've got some protections against closing a school, but I've lived through financial rack and ruin, and there's nothing to prevent the consequent special legislation, closing schools, putting in receivership. So now this thing needs to model on paper. And I think it does model better than these two or three districts going it along.
Okay. Thank you.
Jay, could I comment? Jay?
Yeah.
One of the things I want to see on term limits, so people like it's consecutive terms. Somebody could go 8 years, they could go off for 2, and they could run again. It just means they can't continue on. It's got to be a break in that service, just so everybody knows when we say term limits, it's not for life. It's 2 terms in a row, go off, and then you can come back on. And the other thing on debt, there's D and N, which is defined in the legislature, in the law. The school committee have to follow those laws. So we're not changing anything on that.
Okay.
All right, Karen, and then if there's no one else, we'll go to the next step. Karen?
Okay, thanks. I'd also like to thank the people who labored intensively for a year to produce this document. I know that it is a long process, and I know that Michelle has been through this several times. So thank you. I would just like to understand the decision made to, I know there are a number of ways you can comprise a school committee in a regional district. Why the method that Gil Montague already pursues, but Pioneer does not? Why that method of sort of a population type configuration rather than equal numbers for equal towns? Why that was chosen and what was the nature of the conversation? Thank
Yeah. So good question. Lots and lots of conversation on this point. You can't, first of all, you can't do equal numbers from each town. That's not in compliance with the one man, one vote requirement.
you. I thought I had seen it as an option
No,
in
it's not.
in the state laws over
No.
on education.
And
No,
you've
Pat
got,
Shearer cautioned me many, many years ago when I wanted to change the district agreement that going there would endanger the polity that we have at Pioneer.
Okay.
yeah, so anyway, that isn't an option, Karen.
Okay.
The options, let me get this in front of me again, is one of them is to elect committee members by voters in member communities with each representation apportioned according to the population.
Mm-hmm.
And that's got to be within 10% accuracy.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And these are 6 towns with very disparate populations.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start to go down that road, you start to look at a school committee of 22 or 23 people.
I think I'm remembering something about this now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the next option is electing members in district-wide elections. The problem with that option, and I think the draft group was right about this, is that doesn't guarantee that every town is going to have a representative.
Correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next option is the one they chose, which is that everybody votes at the same time. Everybody votes for everybody, but there are requirements that every town be represented.
Mm-hmm. I
Okay.
see. Mm-hmm.
And that's why they chose this one. Now, the
Mm-hmm.
other options are that you can choose a certain number of committee members, and then you can decide to calculate a weight for their votes. Okay.
Right.
So that and if you went down that road, then you'd wind up in a situation where Woolwich and Leiden would probably have like 0.3 of a vote or
Mm-hmm.
0.4 of a vote. And
Right.
that as a concept, that's not really appealing to people. They
No.
want a full vote. Okay. I've actually worked with that system as a superintendent. If you don't, if you have
Oh.
fewer towns, it can work.
Uh-huh.
But with this number of towns, it's tough. And then the last option is one that mostly vocational technical schools use, where like Franklin County, where there's like, I don't know how many, 17 towns or something. So they appoint their members. I believe the select boards appoint, and it
Mm-hmm.
just it's more efficient. And it's a better way to do it. But appointing members here, it's not democratic. It's not, it didn't have appeal.
Mm-hmm.
So the most comfortable option was this business of making sure every town had a representative and
Mm-hmm.
everybody voting at once with a general proportion to how many seats each town got.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if I could just comment, Jay, on and Karen, I lived the experience when I was at Mohawk where I would actually sit with a calculator where people were voting,
Yeah.
and when I was all done, you could have the majority of people vote to support something, and it failed
Right.
when you did percentages. So I didn't like that one at all. I see Raina's hands up.
Yeah. So I think one of my questions was where it didn't the tuition agreement would be honored, but it didn't mention choice. But I think you answered that in the presentation, that school choice was still
Right.
It didn't affect the school choice. Doesn't have to be in the stated explicitly in the agreement. So, one of my other questions is about the section where it talks about the configuration of the and that it only mentions that students from Gill would be allowed to come into the district in seventh, or come into the middle school in seventh grade, and there's 3 other elementary schools that go up to sixth grade currently. So I wonder if did that came up in discussion? Why only the one school was mentioned?
So we
Yeah.
debated that for a long time, and there were pros and cons. Some people felt, well, it's a new super regional school district, and if the middle school is going to be, 6 through 8, then that should apply to all. We did get into the weeds a lot about history and how the Gill district worked with the Gill Montague district, school district, and they had different opinions on this. And when the middle school became 5, so the bottom line was Gill felt we decided to acquiescence to the point that there was some history there, and we would allow the option for parents there still to either remain in the Gill school for 6th grade, or they could go, to Turner's Falls. Many of us, or a number of us, were thinking that if this is truly, not a junior high, but a middle school concept with all of the pieces that you would have in that kind of setting, that it might self-sort, and many students just might want to attend the state-of-the-art middle school. So we felt through consensus that we would, I guess, honor that and just allow that arrangement to continue.
The question is a good one. There was a lot of discussion about the Gill School and allowing that to continue. I believe that the other Gill Montague schools stop at grade 5. But the other part of this is that if to Alan's point, it's kind of a segue to Alan's point. It would be, from a management standpoint, it's going to be very difficult to run a middle school when year to year you don't know whether you have 6th grade there. There's got to be a little bit of consistency there so that you know how to staff your school, the supplies you need, the special ed services you need, and not that, oh, well, we don't have we have a tiny 6th grade, we have a large 6th grade. Part of this was also a conversation about not creating kind of a real difficult management situation at the middle school level.
Good question, though.
Okay, so ultimately, the 3, so Bernardston, Northfield, and Warwick elementary schools will go through a reconfiguration so that they would be pre-K through 5, and then the 6th grade would go to the middle school.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah. Greg, you've been waving your hand a bunch of times. Oh, Renee, did you have something else? I'm sorry.
I do. So then I think you touched on this also with the OPEB and the retirement benefits and pensions will be worked out through legislation after the agreement, after everything else is done. So we don't.
Yeah. So
that's an unknown until the new district happens.
Yeah, because those obligations to pay for retiree insurance and so forth and so on, very real, very serious obligations. So that can't go away. And after when we get to a point where the commissioner approves this document, then the next step is to try to get the legislation, which would transfer that responsibility to the new district. Yeah.
Raina, if I could just reframe, because the way you worded that, I want to be clear that that we're clear, in terms of at least my understanding. We would know what those liabilities would be. It wouldn't be like we wouldn't know until after it was done and it went to the legislators and then they acted upon it. That would be something that we would have to study and we would know that what that information was. And then as the final process, when it goes through the legislative piece, that's when that would officially be acted on. Is that how you understood it?
I guess, I mean, I'm thinking in terms of, there's an agreement right now between Warwick and Pioneer on how those are apportioned. But, yes, the new district would assume all of the responsibilities, but do we know what the contributions would be until everything is said and done?
No, we would know it as part of the process. And when we went to town meeting, we would know that number. And then that number would be acted on later if it was approved by all the towns through legislation.
Yeah.
And David, you gave me an aha moment here. That's interesting, your comments. So I'm going to be thinking about that some more.
Greg?
Greg?
Yeah, sorry, I can't raise a digital hand because I don't have one.
I don't either.
But I just wanted to just point out, like with the Warwick issue, which I thought was a good one brought up by Renee, that the language in the regional agreement, for the most part, I don't think much would have to change. I do think that under Section 13, Part C, the election of officers. The superintendents of the Gill, Montague, and Pioneer Valley Regional School Districts will jointly call for a meeting of the Transitional School Committee the first week, right? So, and they're going to, elect officers. I mean, anything to do with calling districts together to either form the new transition committee, I think would need to include Warwick in a way and be included in the language.
Absolutely.
So just throwing that out there.
No,
that's
that's
a great
very
catch.
good catch.
Good catch. Bill, your hand's up. Hi.
Yeah, I just want to throw in, not to carry this on much longer on this subject, but I think with the designation of a singular middle school, that leads potential for dissuading the town of Gill, for example, in this case, or Pioneer sixth graders to go ahead and join in with the seventh and eighth graders, since they would be isolated. I think that's the issue, is what breadth of ages do you want joined together? And apparently Gill chooses to have their sixth graders with the elementary group, but that could change. And that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, and they give the kids that option. So some parents have their kids attend. My understanding is the terms and others don't.
I can speak to that just because my daughter went there. Often it can be half and half. I mean, half the class will go on to the Great Falls Middle School, and half the class stays behind because they want to do sixth grade at Gill. I think the impact would be minimum because it's not a big school. I think the important thing that Jay brought up is you want to make sure that the overwhelming majority of the sixth graders throughout the district are going, so that you can plan your sixth grade and plan your middle school curriculum and not be at the whim of, like all of the elementary schools having the choice, because then it could be a huge fluctuation. I think it works well in Gill because most of the population's in Montague. So, we don't make a big impact on what happens in sixth grade. Thanks.
All right. Are we ready, Karen? I guess.
Just one more thing, please. The transitional school committee will be comprised the same way as the ultimate new district one, of 13 members divided the same way. And I just wondered if anyone spoke to the fact that the now Gill Montague district will have a majority of members on that committee, as well as the ultimate new combined district committee. And there are policies that need to be decided that will be different from existing ones. there will be school start times that I know we differ quite a bit on. And there will be things like major curriculum philosophies that differ. So I'm wondering, and I hope it doesn't happen, that things will just go one way because this one district that's participating has more people on the school committee.
I'm trying to remember, Greg, I'm going to ask you to help me. Gil has how many reps on the school committee imagined?
We, for Gilmonte, 3, I don't know.
No, in the new district, how many
2.
are imagined?
2.
2. Yeah, so there would be the potential for that, but it's not going to affect votes that require 2/3, number one.
Yeah, I know
It's not
that.
going to affect budgets. And then the other part of this is, may sound idealistic to say this, but it's about trust. It's about working together. And there's no question that the transition school committee is going to have a lot of work to do. It will require some very good and very mature, talented people to work through the tasks that they have. And hopefully they work together, but you can't ignore the population numbers in Montague in particular.
Yeah, I would only add too, we had a very long conversation about the composition of the school committee. And what was interesting, Karen, though, was it really wasn't centered around districts. It wasn't centered like, well, is the towns in Gilmonte going to have more say than the no, but seriously, what happened was it really became a conversation about what town might have too much power, right? It immediately dissolved into, well, Montague could have because of its population size, could have an outsized vote. And Montague, the representatives we had on the draws were very gracious and said, yeah, we see that. We only want 5 members, where if you did it by population, they could easily have overwhelming, majority on every vote. It could vote the rest of the towns out of any decision making. So they gave up part of their percentage to allow that to happen, which I think is, there was a lot of conversation around that. And I don't think the philosophies are too far off, Karen. We had those meetings with the two faculties, and the 2 approaches are being used in both districts. I think we found that out through those conversations.
I'm differing with you on that because there were very few people involved in each of those groups that you talked to. So, yeah, I expect people to be mature adults when they talk about these things, certainly. So I have a final question. Is the public going to be allowed to attend the transitional school committee meetings?
Of course, it's a public meeting. Of course. All right. Can I have one more question or comment, David? I guess you'll have the floor last, and then we got a number of items that we have to move through. So,
okay. So I would hope that we are all looking at this as the creation of a new district, not the merger of 2 districts when there are 3 potentially involved, and certainly not the acquisition of 2 districts by 1 district. I hope we find ways to do things better than any of us have figured out how to do things, and that's where we want to go. Yeah, we got some undertow. We got all the legacy costs from being the 2 districts in the state with the largest loss in population over the last dozen years or so, and have all that overhead from having had twice as many employees, and a lot of them retired. We spend an inordinate amount of money on retiree costs. So this is a fresh start in a new way, not a struggle over whose way of these 2 regional schools is going to prevail.
all right, I would like to move on with the agenda. Jay, thank you for that review. That was very, very helpful. Stick around for a few minutes if you would. So I think, in terms of our checking our boxes and moving along, I'd like to, if the committee's, if the board's comfortable to, I'd entertain a motion to have Attorney Dupre conduct a technical review of this document. And then we'll see what, feedback, we get once he's done that. And Jay, you've done your part to that process. So someone's willing to make that
I'll
motion.
make the motion.
Mhm.
Thank you, Bill. Is there a second?
I'll second it. Sorry.
Okay. Who is that?
Michelle.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. All right. Any other discussion? All right. I'll start with you, Bill. You're on my left now. Everyone keeps moving around these little boxes. So I'll do
Right.
a roll call vote. Bill?
Yes.
And I vote yes. And Greg?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
And Renee?
Yes.
Steve? Oh, sorry. Raina?
Yes.
And Cliff?
Yes.
And Christy?
Yes.
Deb?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
And Michelle?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Did I miss anyone as the boxes moved around? All right, thank you. So that's the next piece of that. I'll get in touch with the attorney. The idea behind this is we were thinking that, and I wanted some input from you. We were thinking that maybe we would take this initial document and just send it to the select boards as a heads up that's saying we're going to be sending this for technical review and there are other pieces to it, but to get some familiarity with it, send that to the boards. And then when we get the feedback, share that with them and then encourage them to have their own attorneys look at it, or maybe collectively decide on an attorney to look at it for the towns. But what's your thought about that? Do you think that makes sense to do that, or should we wait until some time could go by before we get the feedback from Desi and the attorney on the technical review? As I say, I'm inclined to be as upfront and share as much information as we have as we go along the process. Does anyone feel strongly that we should wait? I'm not putting people to sleep. All right. Yeah.
Alan, I would love to hear from other towns because I'm so close with the select board that Leiden Select Board does know pretty much what's going on. And Catherine was on our subcommittee and she's chair. So it would be interesting to hear what other towns think.
Alan's pretty shy and Warwick Select Board have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gil has a pretty good idea what's going on.
So am I hearing yes? Share what we have so far?
Yeah.
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 Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. Then do we have the minutes, Greg?
That would be a no.
Okay. Skipping over that. So then there have in between these since our last meeting, there have been several correspondence, and I'm hoping that you've seen that in emails over time. There was one to the select boards that gave just before Christmas, just to give them a heads up to keep them in the loop of, where we were in the process. I was a bit discouraged at the time because, we were spending sometimes 3-4 meetings just on one article. I thought it's going to take us 3 years to get through this, but we came together and it was really a great process. So that was informational. I may have had a faux pas on my part. I was looking at doing an annual town meeting, and I was informed by maybe it was Berniston that they had a February 28th deadline for information, and May is rapidly approaching. So I tried to craft a very factual annual town report just to provide an update. And I think that is in time that would be included. All of you received that. So in the perfect world, I guess I could have called a special meeting just to review a document to go to the town. So I apologize for that. I hope it represented like a good summary of where we've been. We would, so this is up for discussion. I was thinking that to put this back on the radar screen, that if we could ask the town moderators for just like 3 minutes at the beginning of town meeting to just give a heads up on what to expect in the coming months. We've got 6-7 months to provide outreach, and certain things will be happening. I'm willing to write a brief script, and it would basically, letting them know that we're might have QR codes that are around different places. People can scan it that would take them to the regional agreement, make sure that people know dates that we would have meetings in the towns or in the districts to review things. And whatever, if we're able to secure someone who help us with outreach and through conversations with you, what kinds of things could we do to help get this word out? So if it makes sense to you, I can craft something and we have somebody just volunteer at some point before the town meeting to, I would send something to the moderators on your behalf and someone could volunteer to just review it. We could also make it available when people come in the door, what that script is if they miss town meeting, and it's available as well, or they could collect it.
I really think it's a bad idea, Alan. I don't appreciate using a captive audience. People came there. If there's actionable item on the agenda, what I suggest is well-written, concise information printed in hand. And when town meeting goes slow and is slogging, they got something in their hand to read. But we're dealing with people that make the commitment to come to town meeting, and I will not allow this at our meal site where I cook. That people want to come in and if it's the sheriff's department or something, I'll send them to the Council on Aging for clearance that they can take advantage of the captive audience situation. But I don't think it's right.
All right.
It's going to be a damn long town meeting we're going to have, and it's going to be contentious.
Well, okay. Thank you for sharing that. I think it makes sense, but every town could then decide as well. It's going to be up to the town moderator. But Greg?
It could be left up to the town. I mean, I don't have a problem with it. We often have, superintendents there to present their, but they're there for any questions. We could make it flexible if I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions regarding the STRPB's work at the annual town meeting, but I don't necessarily have to speak. It could be a written report, like David said, and then just announce, does anyone have any questions about it? And I'd be happy to answer them. So
I just looked, and I do the town report, and I've apparently dropped the ball on what the 6 town has. So please resend it to me.
Okay. Yeah, and I wasn't thinking, you used the word report, Greg. I wasn't even thinking of that because I don't want to get into reviewing the merits and so forth of it. It was just, here's a heads up on what to expect in the coming months. And it just puts it in front of them, to people that are there. Oh, okay, this is something I probably need to be paying attention to if there's going to be a vote on it.
Yeah. Can I just say, I think it's a perfect time. I don't think people are being held captive. I think people need to know about what's happening, and that's the one time that most people who are concerned about what's going on in the town show up. And it would not be long. It would not be a discussion. It wouldn't be a slideshow. It would be the same written statement that we would all probably see beforehand, that we would all just share out as just information. And I think it would be a missed opportunity. And yeah, I think it'd be a huge missed opportunity. And then people can get in contact with me or anyone else who's willing to talk to them about the work we've been doing. There are lots of new people who come to Northfield who have no idea, and there are lots of people who have had one opinion and now have changed their mind and probably would like a chance to be able to hear about it. So I definitely don't want to miss that opportunity.
Pat, you're on mute, Pat. No, still on mute. We'll let you know when you come off. No, still waiting. Got the unmute button.
My computer is doing strange things tonight.
Perfect.
I think it's perfectly great to do that. But if David is adamant that he doesn't want it in Warwick, let's just leave it up to the town officials, the town moderators in the town, and have something to pass out, and we'd all get a script to read, and that would be it.
Let's get serious and let's bake cookies and invite people 15 minutes early and hold forth and talk to them. But I just think using the town
I gotta
meeting
jump in here a
slot.
little bit because I gotta sign off.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that you're going to reach out to Russell and explain what's required.
I will.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll draft something for the town moderators. They can see if they want to do that or not. And I'll prepare a script, and then we'll go from there. We still got some time. We've got another month. So let's see. First town meeting is Warwick. And aren't we? I thought we were 5. Yeah, so and then the last one is Michelle, I think it's you, right? On June 6th?
Yes. No, June 2nd.
Oh, June 2nd.
Yeah.
Okay. So if someone wants to correct their agenda, I didn't have that at the time. So that was informational. And okay, we've covered that. Update on the naming committee. I know both Debs have been working on this, and you'll be getting some names probably end of April, maybe beginning of May, somewhere around there. Deb, can you just comment real quick? You're on mute.
Sorry. I'm sorry Deb Bloomer's not here because she's sort of setting the tone for our little committee.
Yeah.
And she wants, so it's supposed to be talking to as many people as we can talk to, as many stakeholders. I actually, just telling people, I've been getting emails from people this evening because I put a little letter to the editor and the recorder about it. So my family's horrified that I gave my personal email, but whatever. I have been getting them. People have been writing some of their just names, which is kind of cool. I put it in the town newsletter, talked to different committees. I put it out to the select board. I did put it out to, wrote a nice, I think, very friendly letter to the superintendent and the principal at Pioneer, and they've chosen not to want to bring it to the students. Deb and I both felt that was the most important thing we could do, is to ask students. And Patricia said that she did not feel that the students needed to participate at this time.
Okay.
And,
did you do that with Gil Montague? Did you send something
Deb did the same. I didn't do it.
Oh,
Deb
okay.
took care of Gil Montague. I took care of Pioneer.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, I was just reaching out to different stakeholders to see if they want. So thank you for that.
So
Appreciate it.
I have about less than 10 names. Some of them are similar, but yeah.
All right. So eventually those are going to come back to the planning board, and we're going to have a really lively, fun discussion on what the name of the new district should be called. Be interesting.
And we have a smaller group that we're going to meet first.
Yeah.
That represent all the towns, like that Deb and I have just organized, people we know from different towns. We're going to meet one time over Zoom, share out the names, and then come up with a handful of names that we think might be best.
Perfect.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Can I ask a question, Alan?
Sure,
Sure.
of course.
Deb,
Of course.
how about going the route? I mean, I'd love to have student involvement. How about trying to find some students outside of the school and talk with their parents?
I can do that. I know a handful of students. I know more alums. I can do that. I can do that. I just want people to know I did try at the high school in this moment of time. I'm not going back.
Right.
That's just the way it
No,
is.
Right.
that's all you can do is try. And I think that it's very important to get the student input and that there's a lot of great students that I think would provide their input.
Yeah, I can definitely try. One of the people on this tiny committee that Deb and I have organized has an alum and a current student there, and I know 2 or 3 others who go to Pioneer that I can ask.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And my
great.
understanding is that when we move this document forward to DESI, for review and so forth, it has to have a name. And so, trying to I don't think we have an option of doing it after the fact. We have to have a name in this document as we go forward. So let's, I think you're on a good pathway, and let's see what comes out for names.
I have had people say to me, including a select board member, say, you should have a temporary placeholder name. And I've just been like, I've been tasked to come up with a name. I don't know if it's temporary or not, but
because it's required. It is required.
It's just required. So I guess if people don't like it, I don't know where to go from that. Do we just switch it out later on? I don't know.
Well, you might have to have the regional agreement amended if it passes to change it to another name.
I will say I'm not going to name it Untitled Project if I'm spending all this time.
No, you can't. The DESI requires a name. Okay, moving on. Thank you for that update.
I worked on movies that were called that for a while.
Yeah, they didn't have to go through DESI, David. Then we have, okay, we're moving right along. So Dorinda hasn't been able to join us. Greg, could you speak to this real quick we're going to vote to where to post these, because we did take a vote prior to where we post them now.
Yeah, I just think that if we are going to start posting our meetings, the agendas on the new website, which I would recommend that we do at this point, because we created this website and we've been migrating the minutes and agendas over there in addition to the old site, that we could vote to move or change the posting requirement to our new website, which is the sixtowns.org, and not require us ourselves to post on the STRPB OFFC or whatever it is website, STRPB at Google Sites.
Would you mind, Greg, putting that in the form of a motion?
I can make a motion. That's fine. I'm just going to call up I would like to make a motion that we change our posting requirement where we post our agendas for the public from sites.google.com/view/strpb/home to 6 as in the number, towns, all one word in a sense, .org.
Sounds simpler for people to find.
6 is a number, and then towns, a lot easier to remember, and we will post that. We will post them on that website.
I second.
Our new website. Thank you.
All right.
And we'll put a forwarder on the old one.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, definitely. We can put a forward on it.
Good idea.
And an announcement. Yes.
Redirect.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Thanks, David. So any discussion? Roll call vote. Bill?
Yes.
Alan, yes. And Karen?
Yes.
And Raina
Yes.
and Greg.
Yes,
Right.
all right. The one thing I
moved-
forgot was to designate a date as to when that would happen. So may I amend the motion to give me at least, what's the date today?
2 hours.
Yeah. Hang on. Let's give me 2 weeks by April 9th. So
All right, so that's a friendly amendment. Who seconded
Agreed.
before? David, so he agreed. I'm going to continue with the vote. So I had a yes. I don't think, if Bill, you have no objection, I'll still record that as a yes. I'm a yes. Karen was a yes. Raina was a yes.
Yeah.
Greg, you haven't said anything. You just
I
amended
am a
it.
yes. I am a
You're a
yes.
yes. Raina, Renee,
Yes.
Pat,
Yes.
Deb Pote,
Yes.
and thank you, Christy,
Yes.
and David,
Yes.
and Michelle,
Yes.
and Cliff.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, perfect. And then we have so that took care of that. And then the outreach, these are some ideas. We've had a pretty long meeting, so I would say for now, if people have other ideas on how we might begin to have public outreach. When Greg and I recently attended a meeting up in the Berkshire
Mm.
12, I think it was, and so we learned about how their regionalization went and how they're dealing with smaller enrollments and so forth. And so we learned a lot from that process. And in the conversation, there was a couple of people that when we floated the idea of providing outreach, since they have had experience doing that, that they were amenable to be considered to perhaps provide some of that to us in our outreach efforts. So
Yeah, I will try to set that up. Maybe he can come to one of our meetings. Um, whatever the next meeting may be. But Jake Eberwine, who was the project manager for the 8-town regionalization, incredibly knowledgeable, does very good work when it comes to the marketing and messaging for what they did. And you can check out, I think their website is berk12 either com or org. It's pretty easy to find, and just a holy host of information on regionalization. And you can see sort of the slides that he's set up and the information that he's set up, and it's quite impressive. I think he would do a really good job of marketing this to our towns, so that they don't have to listen to like me or Alan or anyone else on tired of hearing us. So, and it would just be nice to have an outside voice, I think, that has been through it and can speak to the benefits of it.
all right, so we will if people have ideas, we'll add that on the next agenda. I've already talked about efforts to secure a grant, other grants, and we've talked about the obligation of OPEB in identifying that. And we've talked a little bit already about the next step in terms of identifying assets and buildings and stuff. So I think we've covered that as part of our initial review. This was a really good meeting. I also want to give a shout out to you folks. It's pretty amazing. And this is probably going to go down when we have our final document that goes to the state, regardless of how this plays out, that you folks have been in this for the long run. And I would have never imagined, first of all, that 5 years later we'd still be doing this. But it looks like we have several steps to go, and we're getting close to having the towns decide what they want to do with this. So I can't thank you and recognize you enough for all the contributions you've been making, and particularly I don't know how many meetings you've all attended, but it's been a lot. David has a comment that says Great Falls Regional, so I must have misspoke on something.
Placeholder name.
Oh, send it on to Deb. All right. Was there any other business that people want to talk about now, or just as important that you'd like to see on the next agenda? And if you have items for the next agenda, please send them on to Greg. Let's take a look. You have your calendars on a date that we could meet in April.
Do we want to wait, Alan, and wait for the technical review to be completed and then reach out to people and try to set a date?
Well, I have this to offer. When I talked to Russell, because he's had so much expertise in this, his words were, I don't think it's going to be too much of a heavy lift for me because I've been living this for so long and his work in other districts. So we could do that, or we could get a tentative date, and if he's ready, we meet, and if he's not, then we reschedule. I think I would like to try to nail something down. We can always move it if we have to. So if we're going that route, today's the 26th. April 16th is before the April vacation. That's a Wednesday. I'm also thinking about, should we schedule this for 7 o'clock instead of 6:30? Because it seems like there's lots of meetings that come up prior to this, and people are rushing to be able to get out of one meeting and run to another. So if people are amenable to that, we can change that time. This is a really wicked busy time with town meetings and everything going on. So maybe we could make it 7 o'clock. And what do people think about Wednesday, the 16th?
I can't do it.
And when can you do it?
I have the 9th and the 30th open. That's it. As far as Wednesdays.
And how about on Tuesday?
Actually, I take it back. I only have the 9th open. That's it.
What about the 15th? Tuesday, the 15th?
Tuesday the 15th?
No,
Nope, doesn't work for you, Michelle?
no, I can only do like the 30th myself.
I could do
Busy times.
I could do the 8th. I could do the 22nd. Those are Tuesdays, but those are then fall on school committee.
Yeah, and those are during vacation. So let's take a look at the 30th, because that would also give Jay some time too. How about we look at the 30th at 7 o'clock?
All right.
Which is a Wednesday.
I would prefer 6:30. 7 o'clock is so late for me.
Yeah, the 30th I can't make. The only date I have on a Wednesday is the 9th. That's it. I just have select board meetings in Deerfield.
And was the 29th on the Tuesday? Was that doable? Bill, do you have a school committee meeting on that date?
No, I don't believe so. I think it's the 22nd, 8th.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's the 5th. It's the 5th Tuesday of the month, so you should be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So let's
29th is
plan.
open for me.
Let's plan on the 29th on a Tuesday at 6:30. Okay, and that's that's so far out that we should be able to do that. We definitely should have that information back, both from Jay and from Russell from then. And then we'll try to get that to you in advance so everyone would have a chance to review it and think about it. Okay.
All right.
So I think I try to do these for an hour and a half. We're
Motion to adjourn.
very good. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Of course.
That'd be Bill.
Greg, aye.
All right. Roll call vote. Bill?
Greg, aye.
Yes.
Alan, yes. Karen?
Karen, yes.
And Greg? Greg, you're on mute. Yes. Deb Pote?
Yep.
Raina?
Yes.
And Pat?
Yes.
And Renee?
Yes.
Christy?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Cliff? And
Yes.
thank you, Tupper, for joining. All right. Good night. Good evening. See you everyone on in 5 weeks.